Hey, Mark. Hey, I can't hear you on mute. Should be in the bottom panel all the way to the far left-hand side. Oh, it says I cannot unmute you. Hold on a second. You're not allowed to unmute yourself? How about that? How about now? Now you should be able to. Um, Can you try that button one more time? I changed the control there. Huh. What is happening here?
There we go.
Give me a moment.
It'll work now?
So we got some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
Give me a moment here. We'll get this thing rolling. Try to figure out how to get you in as a
Hello?
so we don't have
Hello? Hello?
should
Hello?
now be in
Hello?
as a person that can contribute.
Hello?
Oh, no luck turning on the
Jeff,
I
Jeff,
can hear
can you
you.
hear me?
I can hear
is
you.
you unmuted.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. All right. Hey, Jeff Miller.
What's up? How are you?
I'm good. So let's get this thing rolling in. Let me share my screen here. Let's start this thing off. And Jeff, as people are coming in yourself, I'd love to hear from you as well in the comments as well. Let me know
Yeah,
if
I've got about 20 or 30 minutes. I'm traveling today, but definitely want to jump in on the front end of this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, let's get started. We'll run through this. If somebody joins in, I'll let you all know. But for right now, we'll just treat this as kind of a training ground because we didn't get anybody to sign up beforehand. But hopefully, just a way to run through this for all of us. So I'm going to run this like a regular show, Mark.
Sure.
And today,
No John Lane today?
no, he's traveling to Atlanta. So.
Gotcha.
All right, let me run this as like a regular episode, and I'll get this thing started. Hello, everyone. Because I'm going to be using this in the future. Hi, everyone. I'm Vinay Raman, CEO of Carmo, and I spend most of my time trying to see and visualize friction in organizations, how it forms inside those organizations, long before the numbers can tell you that it's going to happen. And today's episode is when seeing more actually makes you feel less in control. Today is not about fixing anything. Today is actually more about noticing the patterns, noticing where that friction is coming from. Today, I got joining as my guest, Mark Crosby. He is many years in B2B sales as a coach. He is an Accelerate Network member and someone who spent years inside organizations scaling and watching this play out in real life. Mark, I'd love to just check in and say hi. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Excited to hear more about what some of the solutions that you have to offer to diagnose some of this friction.
Yeah, and today I want to focus more on just kind of the identification of it. uh, less on the analysis and more about just let's see what's there, what's kind of lurking under the surface for organizations. So today, Mark, I'd love for you to share some stories and kind of what you've seen on the ground in the past, what you may even be experiencing. So a question that I'm going to kind of launch out to the audience, just to kind of get the wheels sort of spinning in your head, is have you ever been in a situation or where have you had more data, but it just made things feel less clear than before? Kind of what I would like you to think about. Mark, how about you? Any thoughts where you've been in a situation where people had more information, didn't really actually make things any better?
Yeah, I think most of the assumptions for executive leaders, regardless of what function you're in, is that more data is going to provide you more insights, and it just leads to more confusion amongst everybody. It's just like when you're out shopping for something, you have 100 different choices. It doesn't make it any better. It actually makes it more confusing. And I think a lot of the foundations that a lot of companies, as they're scaling, they think that a better dashboard or better insights and better analytics from data is going to help them out, when fundamentally there's cracks in the foundation as far as how the businesses has been built and how they've scaled. And so that's where I think I love what you're about to talk about, because it obviously highlights some of the cracks that people aren't aware that they even have.
Yeah, agreed. Let me keep moving here. So I'd like you to consider this if you're listening in, right? From where you are right now, sort of the vista that you see, the perspective, everything looks stable. Nothing really feels urgent. Mark, I want to kind of come back to you on this, right? I'm thinking sort of a lake. Everything looks calm on the surface. Everything looks fantastic. But underneath the surface of that water, there's a flurry of activity, people running around kind of, I guess it's not a chicken under the water, but fish running around with their heads cut off. Things look fine, but underneath the surface, things feel a lot heavier. Have you ever experienced that before?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that typical diagram that you see of an iceberg, and you might see a little bit poking out of the water, and then underneath that, there's this huge foundation of different challenges and issues that companies have. And I think that this also goes into a variety of challenges that companies face, is where they're firefighting day to day. And, maybe the results at the end of the quarter, maybe at the end of the week, and maybe at the end of the year, they seem good. But some of those, I think, financial outcomes might mask some of the underlying problems as well.
Yeah. So, hey, Max Collect has joined us as well. Hey, Max, thanks for joining in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so the point I want to make here for any audience that are listening to this today or in the future, I want you to kind of get this flywheel of observation starting with you. And the thought I would like to give you is, where does the organization that you're in today feel stable right now? What does that gut feel, and where things feel stable and everything seems good? The surface of that lake looks nice and calm. Because here's the thing, those things don't actually arrive as problems, they arrive as drag. Later on, it shows up. Mark, I want to come back to you again here and ask you a question, just kind of experientially. You've done a lot in sales, but generally in organizations that you've worked with, what's usually the first sign that something's off? What is that little flag or semaphore that goes off?
Oh gosh, if it was only one thing, I think it would probably be easy, but it's always something that's different. I mean, back to stability, I think part of those subtle drags are that somebody in their role might feel like they're stable because everything's good within, I guess, their roles and responsibilities. And I think the inconsistencies of those drags is when you try to have somebody in their role interact with somebody else, and that doesn't seem to be smooth and efficient. And I think when you're scaling, those are a lot of the challenges that we see, as far as everything is good in my lane, everything is good in his lane. But then when you need to work together in order to support a customer, that's when friction starts to develop. And so I guess one of those, to answer your question, maybe one of those first signals would be from a customer, where maybe you're missing their expectations, or you're missing a delivery date, or maybe there's confusion as far as pricing or whatever that might look like. And I'd say typically starts with the customer.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it could be something from the outward into the organization. It could be intra-team, or it could be inter-teams, right? There's three different ways this thing could potentially rear its head. And the question, kind of keeping this flywheel turning here for anybody who's listening in, which of these kind of shows up for you first? Is it delay? Is it a drag, or it's explanations that starts to pop up and starts to creep in from kind of really nowhere? Because what I'd like you to do is just take this moment to sort of notice what you've been seeing in your organization, right? Because today is not about fixing, it's not about diagnosing, it's not about debate. It's really just kind of seeing more of what's present already in the organization. It's already there. It's kind of lurking under the surface, like that lake I was talking about. The reason I want to call this pause is because just taking a look at what that activity that's happening under the surface is really important. Mark, love to hear from you. When leaders skip that pause, what happens? And they don't
I mean, I think, if you skip it, I mean, I think if, diagnosing and having your finger on the pulse as far as the efficiencies of your business aren't done on a consistent basis, that's where, those issues that are below the surface, as you're describing, will tend to percolate in ways as I was articulating, at least with the customer. But it could be on the operational side. It could be from a variety of different ways. And at some point, it's going to kind of think of like a volcano. I mean, that's always bubbling under the surface as far as just as problems. And at some point, it will release, and probably in a way that's not going to be good for your business, or your customers, or your profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. So continue thinking about this flywheel of what's happening in your organization and inspecting it. What do you tend to rush into fixing instead of just taking the time to notice what's actually happened? The silent signals that are kind of there. Because this is sort of the anatomy of how friction and drag comes forward, right? It starts with this one small issue. The signal starts to spread as the scale increases. You may have had one person in that role who was doing it for a long time. Now all of a sudden that role is expanded to 5 people in that seat. It could be in operations, it could be in sales, it could be in finance. And what was small because it was one individual has now become 5. And it starts to turn into more of a system-wide problem without anyone who really kind of owning that or giving it a decision to say, hey, this could really happen. Mark, give me a story here. You were talking about customers. How has this happened where you come in to help scale sales teams? They came in, it was a customer issue that all of a sudden now it's sort of a pandemic in the organization, or maybe not so dramatic. But have you seen it scale like that? A small issue that just turned into sort of a systemic problem?
Yeah, certainly. I think, there's a lot of what I've seen as far as sales leaders tend to mask some of these issues in a variety of different ways. And I think if, the sales leader is, enabling the sales team to have certain behaviors that are maybe bad for business, or maybe bad for their customers. One of the common issues that I see is that that sales leader sometimes leaves the business and he goes on to another place. And so then that's where a lot of these issues start to surface, as far as, maybe that sales leader was interjecting at times where, to cover for a sales rep, or to cover for operations, or to cover from somebody else, or, kowtowing to every request that a customer had along the way. And then that person leaves. And that's where some of those issues surface, of all these foundational problems with the business that are just typically masked, typically by one person. But, if you had these signals along the way, if you were able to, I guess, have a pulse, as I was describing before, as far as what could be better with the business, when that, figurehead leaves the business, it probably wouldn't be so traumatic, because you'd be able to probably diagnose some of these signals, as you're saying, along the way, to help so you don't get into a firefighting mode.
Yeah, Jeff, Max, I'd love to hear from you all. What I'm kind of hearing from you, Mark, is this idea that you've got this sort of the system is compensating for something now, and that was never agreed to, but now the system is always expecting that compensation. That founder or that person who started sales up, and now it's scaled to 5 people, and everything relies on that person who's done that operations, that one engineer, or that one person in finance who always kind of came to the rescue. becomes about heroics as opposed to process. Max, Jeff, any comments or thoughts about that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey guys, sorry. Yeah, the question is related to scaling and the drama that can go along with that when the systems and processes aren't in place is what I'm hearing. I'm having to be packing up a little bit. I am listening, but yeah, I mean, it's when it shows its head, a lot of times I see it in relationships that are just the drama and the politics and the bureaucracy that that people get frustrated. Lack of processes or systems usually are part of the problem. Clarity and role, role clarity is huge. Regular communication and one-to-ones and being able to regularly review, and you have to have transparency and in order to have accountability. And if you don't have those things in place, it's just not going to end well. Like Mark said, it could end up with a customer blow up. I recently saw it blow up between the sales manager and one of the salespeople. And actually, Vinay, it was OAD that really came in, and because I did an exercise, everybody took the OAD, and we had a session, and they learned to appreciate each other. Because in a lot of ways they are the same. They're wired somewhat similar. They're just coming up the mountain from a different side. Right. And they need to respect and understand how each one is wired. So that was huge, actually, for them to get past that. They've been working together for 20 years. 20 years. And it just started blowing up. It was like a volcano, like you were saying. It blew up while I was there during my agreement. And I was like, let's do this, And so that was my recent experience with.
So I want to put a cap on that, because this is what I'd like to ask the audience, right? And because I want to got another slide here I want to move to. And it's what kind of started as small, but now starts to feel harder to unwind, right? I mean, 20 years they've been doing this. There's been compensation in the system already built in. All of a sudden, 20 years later, that's a lot to unpack, right? In any organization, regardless of the size. So what I want to start to do here is start talking about signal, right? This is not about evidence. It's not about people being right or wrong. This is not about performance. It's really just one leader's experience. And I want to kind of build this as a foundation for what we're going to start to see a little more of here. Where is what one individual, like you were talking about, Jeff, right? So question for you, Mark, and Max, I'd love to come back and get some of your thoughts as well. Mm-hmm. Mark, so when a leader brings you something like this, what do they usually think the problem is?
Well, they usually think that the problem is not their problem. It's about the other people within the organization that are the problem. And I think that's probably part of the problem as far as it's just, being, I guess, objective as far as what's going on and kind of being honest with yourself, taking ownership of your business, whether you're on the commercial lines or in the operational side of it. That's typically the issue. But, I think like you'll get to maybe some of those assumptions are typically inaccurate as far as what they think the problem is. It might be their fault. Maybe it's not even the rep's fault. Maybe it's a process problem or something like that that's creating, some of the issues that they're seeing. But like I said, I think, most people are bogged down with the day-to-day in order to, and they miss these signals, quite honestly. And then those red flags might be all over the place, whether it's in emails or the communication or presentation or just internally as far as how they're interacting with other people in the business. And that's where obviously alignment is key to this, but most people don't have the time to zoom out and take the time to recognize those signals.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paraphrase that, and Max, I'd love to hear from you. So I'm hearing the problem is that they will immediately jump to this conclusion that somebody else is in the wrong, not them. And the fact is, and back to your point, Jeff, it's actually neither one of them being right or wrong. They've just got a different point of view on what's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And probably somewhere in the middle between those two, there's some truth to both sides, right? So Max, question, and I want to give this as for something that all can think about who might be listening in today or in the future. Whose perspective do you usually hear first when something feels off? And what do you think people, how do you respond to that, Max?
Yeah. I mean, everything that we're talking about has just happened in a 30-minute conversation that I had on Tuesday. I mean, it was it's typically a CMO or a CRO that I hear from first. And in this case, it was a CMO, and they internally thought, when we started the conversation, that they had an internal SDR problem. Then we started talking through it, and we're like, okay, you actually just have a process problem. Then we went even deeper, and it's like, you just have a communication problem from the CMO and the CRO and who's owning what, and the trickle down for execution. Like it just went so much deeper. And I mean, geez, already this year, there's countless examples of that. But it just comes down to the lack of process to address those things in the first place, right? It's kind of this subjective, like what they think, what they feel thing, but no real way to measure and move forward. And so out of that, it actually became a much bigger conversation. That's like, it's just relevant here. But yeah, it's usually CMO, CRO type stuff, at least what we hear from, in our world.
So I think that's a perfect lead into what I want to show here next on the screen. So anybody who's listening in, I'm going to go through this slowly because I want to let you digest this. This right here is a single leader's view of the system of the organization that they're in. It's not about right. It's not about wrong. It's just a signal. And I think of what Jeff was just saying. Two different people just saw it different ways, right? So this is just one individual's vision or perspective of what's happening in the organization. Mark, I want to come back to you. This feel familiar at all to you in terms of what you've seen with organizations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as far as just how I interpret this single leader's view, I mean, everything's kind of just status quo. Not everything's great, and there's probably, obviously, an acute, I guess, observation that process efficiency and WeWork loops are a problem, but everything else is just, I would say an average of 5 or 6 across the board, which, in a sense, I would say is not uncommon for what I've seen.
So I got a follow-up question to that, right? So what does this not tell us, right? You're seeing this person and kind of how they see the world. What is it not telling us?
Well, it doesn't tell us how everybody else sees, I guess, the same system as well. And so I think that would be tremendously helpful to understand, does everybody agree with my point of view? As we were talking about before, it's not right or wrong. It's just a point of view. That would be tremendously helpful to understand, I guess, what everyone else on the team thinks.
So I've been talking about this idea of getting this flywheel for you to be able to notice as an audience what's happening here. And as you've had a couple of seconds to look at this, 2 questions I've got for you. What part of this shape feels most familiar to you in terms of what you might already see or what you believe exists in your team? And just kind of internally, what do you see or what do you feel most confident about in the system that you have in your organization today? Because here's what probably is going to come up in people's minds. Is this good or bad? Max, Jeff, Mark, I'd love to hear. Is this good or bad? What do you think?
I think it's bad only because I think, as I mentioned before, it's just status quo. I would think that there would be more, I guess, extremes if there was a clear point of view as far as what's really working and what's not working. I would actually feel better if there were some more 9s or 10s out there, and maybe some more, I guess, results that are closer to the middle as far as things that aren't working. I mean, right now it's just kind of there's a little bit of ambiguity. It's like kind of nebulous as far as what's working and what's not working.
So that's the follow-on question I have is what does a healthy version look like? And I think you're kind of starting to touch on that. Max, Jeff, any thoughts about the shape, good or bad? What does healthy look like?
Yeah, as I look at this, it looks like maybe they feel very comfortable in what they own, right? And some other, like other people, like they don't feel as comfortable in what their teammates might own, right? So to me, could be bad from a pointing finger type deal, right? And so, seeing how everybody else feels, obviously that's the key to what's next. That's my first take just by looking at this. But.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing here is that because we want to stay in this place of non-judgment, right? You all made some key insights here, and I think that's really, really valuable, right? This is just how the person sees the system, right? They may have gotten comfortable in the system. They may have been in this role for 20 years, right? Other people coming in the door who've just joined in the last year and a half probably don't see it the same way, right? They don't see that decision ownership, escalation paths, and load in the same way. They see process efficiency and cross-beam handoffs in a different way. That's kind of that's kind of telling a little bit about that person, kind of as you did, Max. You were able to very quickly come to a conclusion about who this person is, right? Let's frame it up with something else, right? Same system, different experience. So, Mark, kind of curious, what stands out when you compare these two views? What kind of goes through your head?
Yeah, obviously what's working for the team and their perception as far as what's good and bad obviously doesn't line up with the executive leadership. So I actually like this better just because it does give you those, very telling signals as far as, process efficiency. They think it's great. And why is that a disconnect between what the team feels and what the leader feels? Same thing with the assumption alignment and priority stability. But at least that gives us, 3 clear points to at least start to work with, which I think is the benefit of overlaying one person's point of view with the team's point of view. And that's really the great thing about this graph.
And again, remember, just keep thinking about this every time you're looking at this. It's not about right or wrong. That's just the way they see things.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we do that, Jeff, question for you. What does this do to momentum over time when people look like this in an organization?
Well, you talk about friction all the time. I mean, that's what it does. It creates a bunch of friction. But, and on this graph here, I would question, anybody that gives themselves a perfect score, you're probably not living in reality. Right? So, I mean, I would be almost as concerned about that as like, look, that you don't feel like you've got any way to improve. Is that what you're telling me? So I don't know. That would be a huge concern to me to address. I mean, that's obviously the biggest thing on this graph. It's the same with, it's hard for me to read, but what does that say? Priority and stability.
Priority stability.
Yeah.
Process efficiency.
Pretty big gap there too. They've given themselves, the highest score. I mean, if I'm doing this myself, I'm probably never going to give myself, or any area perfect. So I don't know. I would be a little bit concerned about that too.
So I want to, again, the audience listening in might be seeing something like this for the first time. I got 2 questions for you that I'd like you to kind of start to continue sort of noticing internally, right? First is, where do you think your team experiences the system differently than you do? And second, where is alignment assumed but not verified? Because you can see there's a set of assumptions here that are different in these two individuals. And a question could very easily pop up, well, which view is more accurate? Max, I want to kind of give that to you. I'll throw that one to you. So I'm kind of curious what you think. Which one is more accurate?
Yeah, I don't even know if I can answer which one's more accurate. I don't know if anybody can until you get more layered on, right? Like
somewhere in the middle, probably.
Fix that way into more. Yeah, right. Because I think it's like we talk about all the time. It's the collective, right? It could be 1, it could be 2, but it takes all the other seats to have that visual. And then, I mean, I'm looking at the load there at a 0, like that in itself is a whole session of what's going on, right? So yeah, yep. I think it's still too tough to say. I think it just requires more digging.
So please go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, and also I think when you look at those 3 categories, load, process efficiency, and rework loops, those seem to be out of alignment as well. Because if you're overloaded with work and you're constantly reworking, how is the process efficiency at a 10? So obviously, as Jeff was saying, a 10 assumes a lot. But also, if you're overloaded and you're constantly reworking, how can you have a 10 on process efficiency? So those 3 are not in alignment in themselves, and obviously not in alignment with the leader.
So question for the audience. Anybody who's seeing this for the first time or kind of joining into the session here. Question I want you to ask yourself in terms of what you see. Is this misalignment or is it just perspective? Because the fact is that both of these are accurate. The friction lives, I think, as we've kind of touched on all here, the friction lives in the gaps. The fact that somebody sees process efficiency out here, on the outer edge, and somebody else sees it sort of closer in the center. The fact that somebody sees that escalation paths are reasonably higher value as opposed to see someone else, that is the delta. Because when they make decisions, they're going to decide based on what their perspective is, and that's going to create all the friction in the world. So this is a really, really important slide to me in terms of what happens next, because the wheels are probably spinning in your head. This is where leaders usually rush in. Instead of staying with what they're seeing, they want to kind of notice the distance. They want to notice the gaps. They want to notice those crossings and the tension, but don't quite name it yet because we're getting to judgment already, right? I think we touched on this a little bit already, right? But Jeff had given us an example of two people seeing things and they've been working together for 20 years. Mark, labels. Have you seen labels create more friction instead of less because people said, I know what this thing is?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever good to probably just slap on a label until you are, I guess, have an opportunity to discuss those issues with the team. And labels aren't good for anybody, whether it's individual or a team. At the end of the day, I think that most teams and most individuals are more effective once they kind of look inwardly as far as the opportunity for improvement. As Jeff was saying before, like you gave yourself a 10, there's no room for improvement. I would think that most people would allow themselves to understand that nothing's ever going to probably be perfect. And we always going to probably have a little bit of friction, but when we're not all experiencing a little bit of friction, that could also be a signal as well, because we're probably naive to the fact that there is cracks in the foundation. But labeling, I don't think is ever good for anybody, unless you're clear on what the diagnosis is.
So questions for audience kind of noticing stuff, right? What's the first label? You probably are already kind of this process sort of started in your head. What's the first label that you're attempting to apply here between those two visuals that you saw, those two different charts, two different graphs, lines on the same graph? And does it make you a bit uncomfortable to sit here without naming it? Because a typical follow-up question to this is, don't you have to act? Yeah, you do, absolutely. But action without shared clarity often creates and makes that friction more systemic because they saw the load as different. One person says, hey, load is fantastic. Other person says, load? I have no load at all. A decision made on seeing that much gap between the two leads to adverse results, I believe. Max, thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it, Mark hit it. Like there's, what do we have? Like another 10, 15 minutes or so? Like we could probably take another half hour, right? On that alone. I mean, it is, if you see it, it's like there's you see the articles sometimes that talk about when there's just a sense of urgency to just do things, right? It's like this anxious sense of urgency to just act and fix. And yeah, without clarity, it's like you don't always know if it's going to create more friction. You might be moving the goalpost, but it's not necessarily like moving the ball down the field, kind of an analogy. So yeah, I mean, it's and it's not just industry related either, right? It's just, it's across all segments, all teams. So yeah, the notice before naming it.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Yeah. Feel free to label it down the road after we had a chance to probably dive in a little bit deeper and understand what the symptoms are and what the root causes are as far as some of these problems. And so maybe labeling down the road is okay, but certainly not at this point in time.
So, in what we just saw there, it's not that anything is really dramatic. It's not that anything is broken. Again, still waters on the surface of this lake here. It's that this activity just persists underneath the surface, right? And I want to ask the question of the audience here, as you're kind of digesting this and you're kind of seeing this. Which of those lines kind of hits closest to home right now for you? The effort, the decisions, the priorities? What feels harder for you right now? What feels harder in your organization than it should be? Because the question that usually pops up is, doesn't this resolve itself? Well, the system, as we talked about earlier, keeps compensating instead of correcting the issue. That person, that senior salesperson who's been there for a long period of time, now we've brought in 5 other salespeople. We've brought 5 other people as engineers into this team onboarding process. They keep compensating by asking the senior engineer what to do, because that difference in how things are done was never seen, and we never closed the gap. So the system keeps compensating, and then all of a sudden, that senior engineer says, you know what, I'm not getting the support I used to, I'm leaving. They leave the organization. All of a sudden, those 5 engineers are kind of looking at each other saying, wait, what do you mean you're leaving? Who am I going to call? And they start calling after the person's left the company. It's definitely happened to me. I wonder if it's happened to anybody else. Because language shows up before the resolution. People want to name it. They want to put a label on it because it makes the friction more livable. Oh, we put a label on it, right? And here's kind of some of those things, and I'd love to hear your reflections on this, Mark. I'll just pick one of these. We'll revisit this, right? Kicking the can down the road. Have you ever heard that phrase before in an organization?
All the time. And I think that's probably, as I was mentioning before, is that most people are just consumed with the day to day, or I don't have time to do with that today, or I don't have time to do it this week, or we'll get around to that maybe next quarter. But I guess I just stole your thunder as far as the next line there. But
No, that's perfectly all right. Max, what's a phrase that you've heard that kind of signals that, all right, we're just gonna accept this and tolerate this. This is becoming normal for us.
Yeah, it's a specific phrase is probably, or one that I hear most commonly is just lower priority before even going in. You know, they try to rank it in high, medium, low, and it's automatically low before you go into it, and just more of a reactive approach rather than proactive.
And I think that's common. All organizations do that, but the fact is, you're just putting it on the shelf, and it's still a festering issue in that organization because that senior engineer is carrying a lot more load. They'd probably be burning out because they're doing things for others that they're not supposed to. It could be a senior sales rep who is carrying the load and answering questions for that onboarding. How do you get into the system, right? To bill and send that invoice out with this particular tweak. Why is it a tweak? It shouldn't be a tweak. It should be part of what the process or the CRM naturally does for them, right? It should be part of the script. So we saw this idea, same diagnostic, different people, similar shapes, right? When you see that same shape repeat, what does that tell you about the cause, Mark?
When you mean as far as just the individual or the team?
Yeah. So we saw if we have multiple individuals that have a similar shape, what does that mean as opposed to what we saw there where we've got differing shapes, right? What does that tell you about what's happening? What's the sort of the root issue that's creating it? Does that tell you a different story?
I think so. I mean, if they're overlaying into the same shape, I presume that there's alignment on what's going well and what's not going well.
And would you say that friction is less existent, there's less drag in the system when they're seeing things a common way, as opposed to if they're seeing them
I would just say it's different. I mean, if they're all aligned that things aren't working well and they're not doing anything to fix them, then that friction, as you're articulating, as far as, you know, senior engineer leaving, if you don't put the measures in place in order to plug the hole in the dam, so to speak, then it could get a lot worse.
Max, in organizations that you work with, right? I think this shift the conversation away from individuals and what it does. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Honestly, most relevant thoughts that come to mind from same diagnostic, different people, similar shapes is, yeah, at least if they're all aligned on, the similar points, then they have that starting place, right? Then they can actually, hey, like maybe not just this quarter or next quarter, it's like, no, next week, right? Like we have it like next week, we block this time and, going forward. And yeah, it just creates more of a clear roadmap. So everyone, it kind of is an environment where they chalk it up to, I like being here. I like being here. It's a retention thing, and it's really what people want at the end of the day. So
Question that could pop up from people is, so where do you actually start fixing this? And I think that what I just heard and what all you just said, Mark and Max, both, is this idea that you have to all come to agreement as to what you're seeing as the problem first, right? You all have to be aimed at the same target. We're all going on vacation to Disney World. You can't just say we're all going on vacation, because everyone's got a different idea of what that means. So nothing's been added to the system, right? But at the same time, nothing is hidden anymore. It's just more clarity as to what exists beneath the surface of that lake that has still waters on top. For the audience, I'd like to ask a question here for you to continue to develop your depth and your visibility here, right? What contradiction are you noticing the most? Is it speed versus quality? Is it priority versus capacity, right? Those are the trade-offs that are starting to occur in your organization. Speed, we got to go faster. We need more quality. That could apply to your engineering process. That could apply to your marketing, apply to your sales, right? Priority versus capacity. Hey, we got to close more deals at the beginning of the quarter, versus do we actually have the capacity to handle that influx of deals coming in the door, right? Those are trade-offs that are being made in the system. And if people are seeing things differently, those trade-offs are happening below the surface. It's causing drag. It's causing friction. So I want to make sure I frame this up properly, right? This isn't about opinion. This isn't about hindsight. It's the system. And long before the numbers have even started to show it, right? You don't want to wait till the end of the quarter to find out, oh, we overbooked the number of clients that we could handle, and engineering is now just saying, but guys, we can't do this. We've got to either refund deals, or we've got to backtrack, or we've got to set some other expectations. It's engineering saying, hey, so all those deals that we have, we actually don't have enough engineers to service them, or we don't have enough account managers to provide support in the onboarding process. It causes a hook. Mark, back to your earlier point, the customer kind of coming in there doing, hey, I was supposed to get, and it's not actually happening, right? So this steps out of being personal and starts being about systemic issues. So question for the audience is, what changes if you treat this as a system signal and not a people problem? You don't put the label as in Jack is wrong. It's more about the whole system that Jack is part of has got something to be addressed here. So the whole point of this was to help you notice and see that, because once you see that, it's hard to unsee it. It exists in every organization. The numbers will catch up later. There's systems like and frameworks like EOS and scaling up. There's lots of them that'll help you put KPIs. You want to wait till the end of the quarter to find out that you didn't hit your KPIs, right? Because the signal is already there. It's just underneath the surface, and it's building that friction, right? So we've got this thing, this diagnostic called the core diagnostic, that reveals where that operational friction is forming beneath the surface before the results degrade. So if this resonated, the next step isn't to fix anything. The next step is to see your own system the way we looked at this one. That QR code will take you to the diagnostic, and then you can see it for yourself. Mark, Max, comments, thoughts, closing ideas?
Nothing from my seat.
Yeah, I think this is great. It's a great way to, get started as far as understanding what some of the, as you were saying, below the surface tensions are. You got to start somewhere. You can't continue to kick that can down the road and push it off, or else trouble awaits.
Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. Appreciate you all joining us today, and anybody else who's joined in for the show. Feel free to scan that QR code or go to carmo.net/. FM-L012926. And you'll get to the core diagnostic. Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it, Brian. It's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for joining me today.
Hmm?